Hi, I'm Tom McHugh. I'm the CEO of FINBOURNE Technology, and this is the thing about FinTech. What problems are we solving and who are we solving them for? If you can take the cost of investing from 1.8%, which is on average what people pay for a fund, to 1%, then people would save 5 years on average off their retirement.
The Series B you did was Europe's largest last year.
Unfortunately, most of us engineers live in a world where you're just looking at the failures constantly.
It's a truly inspiring story.
Hello and welcome to our episode of The Thing About FinTech with me, Toby Babb.
And me, Anvar Karimson.
We are here today with Tom McHugh from FINBOURNE. Tom, great to see you.
You too.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
Really good, really good. So look, FINBOURNE has had a stellar few years. I've been fortunate to see it since round a kitchen table to where you are today, all over the world. You're just back from Australia and a tour of duty around Asia and all that sort of stuff as well. I love seeing the journey, and it's a real pleasure to come in here and talk to you a little bit about it today. So we've got lots to cover. Anvar, from the tech side of things, I'm going to look at some of the people and culture stuff that you've been able to develop over the last few years. But before we do that, give us a little bit of an oversight of the origins story of FINBOURNE Technology.
Sure. So as you said, it was 8 years ago, 7 of us around a table. Yeah, it genuinely does feel like that.
It really does.
Yeah, it's like the CEO of Intercom at once described it. It's like running a startup is like a starting point, some funding, some mad stuff happens, another point, some mad stuff happens, and it genuinely feels like that sometimes, and time flies, I guess, when you're having fun.
Yeah.
But it's always been, when we started, we honestly didn't know what we wanted to do. We wanted to do stuff with technology and finance, and then we actually spent 3 to 6 months going, we want to go after efficiency. So we looked at, if you can take the cost of investing from 1.8%, which is on average what people pay for a fund, to 1%, then people would save 5 years on average off their retirement, right? So it has a pretty material social impact, and everything we've built since then is geared towards that efficiency. How do we make financial services in general more efficient, which is an almost unbounded set of technology to build. And when you look at it, that's why sometimes people struggle when they look at FINBOURNE and go, what do you do exactly? Mm-hmm. Well, the answer is always different depending on who you are, because it's driven by that mission.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something we were talking about before.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
So how do you keep on track? You've talked previously a lot about metrics and using that to kind of drive the customer journey. So how does that work? And has that changed over time?
Yeah, so we're more driven by our customers now than we would have been in the early stages. The early stages would have been a lot about, we know there are things you have to do, so you have to build a model that knows what instruments do, you have to build a model that knows what transactions do. There are sort of core entities in finance you have to build, so we were sort of, heads down, blinkered going, we know how to build that, and we wanted to build it in a way where it's bitemporal or reproducible, because the regulators want you to be able to reproduce anything at any point in its history. We needed to build it so it was built in a way where all modern technology is, so API first and open and all those things. It's quite a lot of work to do, and that dominated the first, I'd say, 4 years, maybe even 5 years of our existence. But now we've switched to actually, what problems are we solving and who are we solving them for? Yeah. And that leads to a very different sort of engagement model and almost a different team in some ways, right? You need to be more open, more in front of your customers, more willing to take a punch in the face and learn from it than when you're sitting in your room building stuff you know to be true.
Yeah.
It doesn't really, still not really at the point where it's driven by metrics, right? Our business isn't one where it's B2C and the number of engagement points is going to really drive what we do. It's much more you sit in a room with your customers and go, what's on your regulatory horizon? What's the must-have stuff you need? And then how does that fit into our roadmap? Yeah. Over the past 6 months to a year, we've also been much more public in terms of what the roadmap for us is. So what's our 3-year vision? And quarter by quarter, what's that vision? And as I said at the start, that really isn't important because you don't have anything, you have to build stuff. Now that's very important because our customers need to align their people to what we're going to do over the next couple of years as well. So it's a very different place to live than it was a few years ago. Some ways better, in some ways worse.
Yeah. And how do you transition your team towards that effect?
Slowly. Yeah. It's a really hard thing to do because it feels for a lot of people like they're being challenged, they're being criticized, they're being told to work in a place that's naturally uncomfortable for them, right? A lot of our brightest and best people are people who do very well solving a complex problem and don't really like talking to a customer who's telling them this stuff doesn't work, this isn't how it's supposed to work, and that's been a challenge. And we've had to sort of move around some people who are good at taking that criticism and learning from it, and some people who don't like that. They just don't like doing it. They'll actually be the people who'll get you the best innovation and the best answers to that problem, but they don't like being in the conflict. So.
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting journey, isn't it? And one that probably doesn't get talked about. I mean, look, it's 8 years, but it's 8 years of scale that's probably outstripped most of the industry in terms of the size and scale of the growth of the business. It's been great to see. And as we were talking about beforehand, the Series B you did was Europe's largest last year. Yeah. You've seen the scale now to pushing 300 odd people across the thing. That's a remarkable sort of journey, isn't it, over that sort of period? And as you say, there are different people at various different stages for that sort of thing. How's that been for you? I mean, look, as someone now who's been in institutional organisations before that, to come through and build this up at the same sort of time, it must have been a hell of a journey.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, I look at it going, it feels like you're constantly failing at the next step, right? And everyone goes, startups they're amazing places to be, they're full of excitement, but actually they're just terrifying all of the time in a lot of ways. like genuinely, you spend your life going, Christ, I should have made that decision differently, or oh my God, are we even though it's successful, you live in some ways going, Christ, we could go bankrupt if these things don't happen. Or it's this constant thing of, if I don't hit the next milestone, the stakes are always on a knife edge. Yeah. Always, literally all of the time, always on a knife edge. And that is in some ways incredibly satisfying when you reach all those milestones, but also just constantly terrifying. Genuinely, it's one of those things where you don't really know, because nobody's built it before. Yeah. That's what makes the product unique. You don't really know whether it's going to work with the customers. For the customers you have, you don't really know what they're going to need next. Yeah. And then you don't really know what the team looks like. And you have to run this gauntlet of staying true to who you want to be, whilst understanding you're going to get most of it wrong most of the time. Yeah. It's a fairly.
But I think that's an important part of it, isn't it? When you have that understanding that you're not going to be perfect, and there's no such thing as a perfect journey through that sort of through those sort of things. And if they are, it's probably very airbrushed all the way through that piece.
What's that? The history is written by the victor sort of problem, right?
The revisionist history of FinTech startups. But I think it's an interesting piece, isn't it, about where. And I think what you said from that, and what I take from that, is just the importance of actually listening to the customers. I think sometimes you see people who come into this and say, right, we have a very direct way of the problem which we want to solve, which we are very animated about. We're very, this is our way, this is what we need to do, and you need to listen to us about how we're going to solve all your problems. My sense from you guys is that you've been very led by customers. I mean, customers has always been, I remember bumping into Dermot in New York years ago, at the very early sort of stages of it, and you just had a big customer win out there that became an investor there, there afterwards, and all that sort of thing. And that to me has been a really important part of the journey for you. Yeah. Seeing people there, understanding what they're looking for, evolving and developing, as opposed to saying, this is our way, like it or leave it.
Yeah, and everything about our platform is geared towards the idea that we don't know the answer, right? Which is a really odd way to try and build a platform, and it leads to a whole raft of complexity, where if you look at our platform, there are probably 50 different ways of doing anything, right? And the evolution over the last while has been for our customers to ask us which one, right? There are 3 ways of doing this. You tell me what the best practice looks like. And again, that's a fairly sort of recent transition in the business, where we sort of have learned enough to be able to go into most customers and go, no, do it like this, and here's the reasons why, right? What we do though is going, you should do it like this, and here are the reasons why, but this is where you live right now, so how are we going to get from where you live right now to where you need to be? Yeah. And having the agility in the infrastructure to do that is I think what gives us a unique advantage.
And it creates a sort of interesting sales dynamic, doesn't it? In terms of going out there, and you said it just now about the ability to articulate the business and what you do and how you can help and all that sort of stuff. And you're someone who's a buyer of technology sometimes when it's there and that sort of positioning. Talk to me a little bit about that. It's an interesting piece to have a business where you're saying, right, there isn't a off the cuff pitch which said this is exactly what we do.
Yeah, and it's a huge problem for us that we're focused on at the minute to try and fix. Most of our customers come to us at the minute, and the conversation is, we've heard you doing some pretty cool stuff. We don't know what it is. Can you tell us? Yeah. Right. And we take them through the journey, and they end up becoming buyers. The problem we have is that's not very scalable. Right. It works very well when you're in the mode we've been in for a while, which is to try and build everything that's necessary to be able to satisfy the entire breadth of customers we want to eventually go after. And we've been optimizing for that. How do I get customers that do servicing, that do management, that are asset owners, that run hedge funds, that do private capital? Because we want to eventually be able to solve for all of them. Mm-hmm. And that's been driving it. So people come to us and we're like, oh, okay, brilliant, you could use it like that. Here's how you could use it. And we've been trying to hook the early adopters with, the vision is one where you'll be able to do all this stuff seamlessly in one platform. And we've been very fortunate that we've ended up with some of the world's biggest financial institutions willing to go on that journey with us. Right? And that's, I don't know how, honestly, I don't know how, but we've managed to paint a vision for the future that's one where it's been attractive to them and they've been willing to co-develop with us. The problem we have now is we need to turn that into, for you, we do this. Yeah. And we do it at scale, and we make your life easier, and here's the money we save you, and here's the ROI, and we'll be able to get there very quickly. Yeah. And that's what we're focused on now, is that transition. Yeah. And that transition becomes from a people point of view, it becomes a very different one, because I don't approach you anymore in a way where I'm curious and I want to learn, and maybe we could paint a vision of the future anymore. I'm like, I'm going to sell you this is what it looks like, this is your time to value. And it's much more what I describe as enthusiastic and vision driven, and here it is, this is the future, come and buy it, do it like this, do it right now. And those people aren't the people who solve very complex, deep technical problems. And that's probably the way of talking about how our company positioning has had to change over the last few years, right? And we're still in the middle of it, to be honest. And it's
well, it'll always be that. It's the evolution of a scaling business, right?
It is. There will always be something, but for us, this feels like the big one. Like, and it's from an engineering point of view. Unfortunately, most of us engineers live in a world where you're just looking at the failures constantly. You live in a fairly myopic world of like, Christ, the platform doesn't work. Christ, we've had a bug. Oh my God, what is it we're going to do about this? How do we fix this problem? How do we solve this problem? And to go into a world where it's like, actually, this is amazing. We're going to help. That's a transition that takes a while, right? And historically, a lot of engineers they associate that to almost a word that I hear sometimes is integrity, right? Like there's a belief that integrity is in the solution to the problem and not in the selling of the outcome for the customer, and that's as I said, for us, we're focused on the outcome for the customer, and our integrity moves there rather than in the solving of the hard problem.
Yeah, because that ties in with the mission to increase efficiencies, right? So that kind of ties it all together quite nicely. How do you balance the requirements for different customer groups? You know, you're talking about kind of being more open with the roadmap and things like that. That must be quite a delicate balance.
It requires an incredible level of belligerence, would be how I describe it, and an absolute faith in the fact that if you solve it systemically, it will work at scale, right? And what that means is that a lot of our customers come to us and they're like, we need you to add this to the platform, and our answer is almost always no. Like explain to me what that is, and explain to me why you do it, and explain to me, and then we'll come up with a solution that will work for what you're trying to do. Will work to get you from where you are to what the right answer is from a regulatory and a operational point of view, and then you'll be able to do it here, and here, rather than just this one place you're talking about now. And that sometimes is 6 months of heated arguments with customers. And I mean pretty strong arguments we've had with some of our earliest customers where they're like, no, like getting to the point where like, no, we're going to cancel, we're going to walk away. And we're like, no, hang on, stop. Like, if we do this like we've proposed, you'll be able to solve 15 problems instead of one. And you do have to have, as I said, an almost belligerent approach that you have to understand the root of the problem or the root of the process or the root of why people do what they do. And once you do, it leads us to be able to treat all asset classes uniformly on a platform. It leads us to be able to treat all like reporting in a relatively uniform way, and all processes and the bits around the edge will show you how to plug them into the platform, but we're not going to do it for you. That's not our IP. And if it's not something that we ever want to do on the platform, we'll help you to do it, but we're not going to put it in our platform. We're not going to put it in our platform for one customer, ever, never. Like,
as I'm listening to you talking about this, I think it's really interesting that there is, so your background to CEO is from a very tech-orientated pathway, right, and CTO to CEO. And quite often in that, it sort of goes down, as you say, this sort of desire to want to be technically perfect and do all that sort of stuff. And actually, the thing I think you've been brilliant at is looking at that outcome piece and being client-led as opposed to doing it. Because as I said, this belligerence works very well there. But quite often you see evangelist technologists insisting on that this is why it has to go and causing the friction there that doesn't do it. But to be able to take people on that journey and evolve as you have in your role.
The belligerence is never on the technology side. Honestly, technologies come and go. Programming language change. Like the technology, every decision we make today will be wrong in 5 years from now. And I think the belligerence of when you look at it and technically you have a purist belief in this technique or it's just wrong. And if it's not wrong now, it'll be wrong later. Like the belligerence has to be on the process side, the business side, the outcomes of like, what is it you do for your customers? Why do they need this? Like, what is it that they're trying to achieve? And when we know that, we can make it sympathetic to the processing engine from a pure business point of view. Like, trades add to positions, cost works like this, accounting standards work like this, valuation and risk works like this. Why is it that your thing doesn't fit into the general model for how these things should work? That's the part you be belligerent on. If it's a technology, no, honestly.
And where did that evolve in your sort of journey? So if you look at your career, and that's a in my mind exactly the right way to look at these sort of things, but it isn't common. I mean, it's been one of the things that's allowed people to go through that. So if you think about how you've learned, how you've developed, as you say, you sort of sit there 8 years ago around the table to now doing something which hasn't been yet. This on these entrepreneurial journeys, every single day you're doing something and you're running a company you've never run before, right, at that sort of stage. And it's really interesting, isn't it? And it requires a lot of development and learning. And sometimes you can be so busy in that learning, but it feels like that's you've
I was indoctrinated from my first job was at Morgan Stanley, and they had the triangle, which was people, ideas, and capital, and you bring it together to solve customer problems. And we were told that from day one, right? The outcome for the customer and the outcome for the client is what matters, and all the other stuff is just the people, the ideas, the capital, the technology that you need to solve that problem. And then I worked at RBS when we went bankrupt, right? And that's a place where suddenly there's a huge amount of pressure to cut costs. There's a huge amount of pressure to rationalize systems. There's a huge amount of pressure, and a lot of what you'd have historically of the politics goes away, right? You turn into survival mode, and a lot of this, like you can run all this stuff on the same platform, comes from there because we had to cut costs quickly. We had to make very hard decisions repeatedly. We had to get to the point where it became about like, it's all gone wrong. How do you repair your reputation? How do you get to the point where the entire British public, we owe them, right? Like, and you get to the point where when you do that and you live in that world, you learn that your ability to get to the right outcome, your ability to do it with integrity, and everybody's going to be looking at it. That's an environment you have to work in. And for me, I was, and I'm not going to say fortunate. It's never fortunate when you're in that scenario. But I was very fortunate to grow up at companies like Morgan Stanley, like RBS, where you learn that the outcomes are the most important part. Right?
And that this is, as we say, it's been working well. Last year was not an easy time for people to raise money. And I spoke to you through the journey, through all of that at various different phases. I know how much you gave to that particular piece as well. It's a full-on process, right? And you've gone through, seed, Series A, etc., etc. Series B was that Europe's biggest Series B last year at a time where people were struggling to raise money. It was a phenomenal UK success story, which I think you should, and I hope you get the chance to take yourself away from it and realise how proud that you should be of that particular piece. With some phenomenal investors that you've had all the way through. So, as you were talking about beforehand, you've been fortunate to get some amazing companies who've bought into that, some of the biggest institutions in the world who've bought into it. I know there's some exciting things happening that continue to evolve as more people come on and sign up with you as well. If you think about the investors, which is always an important part to get the right investors as opposed to just money, which is another side of it where everyone's involved. Massive question, but talk to us through that sort of journey. Tell us about the story of last year and that sort of process for you.
If you look at our business, it's a fairly unusual one, and one that's actually difficult to finance, right? So most startups, you have an idea, you look at it in a fairly standard way, right? You look at it as point number one, I want to prove that I can flesh out the idea and prove that people can buy it. Then I want to get my first customers and my MVP out there. Then I want to get to the point where I can look at some metrics and go, right, these metrics tell me that if I do more of X, I'll get more of Y out, right? It's the old put $1 in, get $5 out. What we're building is almost the inverse of what the right answer is, right? So we're looking at it going, we're trying to build a platform where it can solve the most complex problems at the most high throughput and scale for the financial services industry, and it doesn't work until everything's finished, right? So we've had a journey where our revenue shows up as nothing, very large numbers, nothing, very large numbers, right? So the predictability of it's low, but we absolutely know that in the end state, it's a business that will be incredibly cash generative and incredibly value generative to its customers, right? And the second one of those is much more important than the first one. But the question is, how do you find investors who understand what the end state looks like and know that it's going to be a massive roller coaster ride in the middle, right? And that was basically what we're looking for. And the first thing you've got to do is, and the investors we chose literally came in and put down a presentation in front of us at the very first meeting, and we're like, this is your industry, this is where you play, this is the size of your market, and I was like, okay, we're done. And then we spent 6 weeks sort of stringing them along in some ways, going like what are the other alternatives? But we sort of knew when we met those investors for the first time. For the investors we ended up with, one of them did that, and then the other one literally came in and went, no, I don't understand, explain to me why. They were very challenging. They were like, no, explain to me again and again and again. And at the end of it, I remember one of the guys on the banking team was like, Christ, that was a hell of a meeting. I was like, no, that was great. You want people who are going to come in and go, this doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. And then at the end of the meeting, they're like, oh, Christ, yeah, no, I see it. Yeah, I see it. I see exactly what the end state looks like, and I see that. And again, they have been like, this is going to be brutal. Yeah. Right? Their view is like what you have to do is not run out of money whilst you're building until you get to the point where everyone will use it. Yeah. Right. And for us, that's what the future will look like. We are absolutely certain that at some point everyone will use this platform, and they'll have to because the cost imperative is so high. So how do you not run out of money until that's true? Yeah. And that's our challenge, right? How do you get to the point where you can do this and get to critical mass fast enough? And that's every day is our focus.
Because critical mass is a truly global business now as well, right?
Yes, it is, yeah.
And was that always the plan? I mean, when you were sat there...
6 months in, it was how do we structurally change the cost of investing? Yeah. How do we go after that 1.8 to 1%? You look at the macroeconomic climate, and fees need to go down on investing. They are, and customers are demanding it, and the complexity of the asset mix is going up at the same time. So now everybody's invested in private equity and private credit and real estate, and you have a much more blended portfolio, and none of the existing technology can do that on a single platform. Yeah. We can, at scale. So how do we get to the point where the first thing you have to do is prove you can do it. Yeah. Then you have to prove that you can go live at enormous scale, and then everybody uses it. Yeah. And we're here on that journey. Yeah. And for us, we think in 12 to 18 months that part of the journey happens, and then it becomes a question for us of a very different set of problems. How do you make sure you don't get hacked? How do you make sure that you still listen to your customers? How do you make sure you still run an open business? How do you make sure you still are innovating? How do you...
The next phase of terror.
The next phase of terror, exactly that, yeah. It's exactly that. And then you end up having to take some of the burden of innovation for those customers, right?
Yeah.
So, and then you have to build for that, and that requires even more communication than we're doing now. So yeah, it's the fun will never stop from that point of view, or the terror will never stop, whichever way whichever way you want to look at it. But it's a pretty clear path of where we're going to get to.
Yeah.
It's just a question of, can you do it fast enough?
Yeah.
That's the balancing act, right? Can you do it fast enough? Right?
And in terms of we spoke before, you were in Australia, you're heading out to the States next week. There's a lot of moving around and such like. If there's lessons you've taken from the globalization of the business over the last few years, where it has popped up and scaled pretty rapidly in all these different locations, what are some of the things you can take away that you'd say, here's some of the things we got right that allowed that to happen, here's some of the things that we could have done better?
So everyone says, oh, you need to be careful because it takes longer than you think it will. But nobody tells you what to do about that. Right?
What do you do about that?
Honestly, nothing. Like, it's just going to take longer than you think. You just need to budget more money than you think for it.
Sounds like your house build.
Yeah, pretty much.
But it's just the way it is, right? Yeah. There's nothing like you go back and you do your next house build. It's going to take longer than you think, and the budget's going to need to be bigger than you think, right? And there aren't any real lessons from it, right? You have to go. For us, 60% of our addressable market's in the US, so we have to be in the US. We waited as long as we could to start that process, and then we started the process, and then it takes time. There's no shortcut.
Sorry to cut in. So you say you waited as long as you could. What made you wait as long as you could?
Because everyone tells you it's going to take longer than you think, and it's going to take more capital than you think.
Yeah.
So we literally waited until because we've sold the product before it's ready. Right, and we've always done that, right? That's the nature of FinTech, and everyone who buys it from you knows that that's what you're doing. But we've sold the product not far ahead. We've never sold anything more than 3 months ahead of where it's there, right? And we've always been very transparent with our customers that this is what we're doing, right? It's going to get to here, and it's going to get to here sometimes in 18 months, and they've been very aware of it. So that goes back to that point of, how do you find on the journey the customers who are going to be able to understand what the future looks like, right? And those early adopters are key. They are absolutely the lifeblood of FinTech, right? Because if
you had a great early adopter as well, didn't you?
We did, yeah. Honestly, every one of our customers so far have been the reason why we still exist, right? And we've had very low churn, right? Like we've had almost nobody go away as a customer, and part of that is because we have been so transparent with them. We have been we're pretty much open book with our customers, and will continue to be so, because without that, you can't innovate. Now, what happens is, as I said, once it's up, it's running, it's live with all these customers, then the late majority come and off you go you're off to the races in terms of scale. But the same's true when we went to the US and we went to Australia. We went to Australia because we were incredibly fortunate to get one of the top 5 banks.
Fortune word coming up again.
Yeah, but we were literally, and all of it was serendipity to some extent. I had an ex-colleague who went to one of the top 5 banks in Australia. He was like, you guys should have a look at this. They did. We went through 6 to 9 months. They adopted the platform. They absolutely rinsed us for a couple of years in terms of feedback. They were like, you need to build it like this, but we loved it. It was brilliant. They used the platform. They used that at incredible scale. And then from there, we ended up getting the biggest superannuation fund as a customer, right? And they are at the precipice of going live now, in a way that will be very transformative for their business. And then that leads to the rest of that cohort coming in and going, actually, can you help us in the same way as you help them? And that's our Australia story. And in the US, we went there. It's very much a case of you've got to let people know you're there, and that's a much harder thing to do than you think.
More scale, isn't it? It's not
the scale's much bigger.
I've been there, trust me.
And it is culturally very different as well, right? I mean, people say it in a sort of glib way, but it really is. Like to get noticed, you have to be a lot more extreme in some ways. You have to be a lot more. Your claims have to be an awful lot bigger than they do here. But once you do get noticed, customers come along in droves, right? So they don't come in ones; they come in threes and sixes, and so for us, we're hitting that point now where again, people are like, oh, I started to hear of you. I don't really know what you do, but I've heard it's something I should definitely look at. And then they come and talk to us and like, oh Christ, yeah, I really should look at that and let me get involved. But that's taken us being going a bit later than we could have gone, knowing that it was going to take a lot longer, and being patient. The one thing I would say is very hard on the team, though. That's the one thing. So when people talk about it, like, you do lose people along the way. Like, it does burn people. Like it and I don't know what to do about that either. But it is really. But
maybe that's part of the whole thing about stages of growth for the right sort of people at the right sort of time for that, isn't it? It's always such an important part of it. And because it's been, we say eight years, and it's been like that. There are people there who love it in the scrappy startup phase. There's people there who love it at the scale up phase, and there's a maturity of business now where you're 300 people, which needs another group of people again. But if you look at that individually and you take the fledgling Australian team, the fledgling US team, it's still that scrappy startup phase, isn't it?
It is,
and it needs the right people at that sort of time to do it. And I love what you guys have been doing, actually. So I remember us speaking a couple of years ago about the marketing, and me sort of enjoying the content you were putting out. And you said, right, you wanted it to be a lot more directive about what you actually did and the problems you solved and what and where we are. I think right now you guys are prolific at the moment in terms of the content that's going out, the value adds that's coming into the conferences that you're speaking at, and all those sort of things. It's reshaping that narrative and putting it out there, and it feels like FinBourne is omnipresent at the moment in the marketplace.
It does, but nobody can still tell you what we do. And that's still a bit of a struggle for us. I think we've come a long way, but we're still not very clear about how we add value, and I think that's still the focus for us. Right? But I think a lot of that comes from proof points. Like, it doesn't matter what we say, it matters what our customers say. And for us, that's where the amplification comes in. And our customers are still, because of the transformative nature of some of what they do, they don't want to tell people what they're using it for. So hence why a lot of people come to us and go, I've heard this is really cool and we should have a look at it, but I don't know what it does.
It's a really interesting conundrum, that, isn't it?
It is, because as well, we can't tell people what our customers are using it for. Right? So, because we don't want to give away some of their IP. So it leaves us in this very bizarre state of, like, people like you might look at the world a bit like this, and we could probably help with some of that, but we can't tell you specifics. Because go back to that point of trusted partner, right? And hence a lot of our stuff comes out as very, we can help you, it'll be great, but I can't tell you how.
Exactly. Don't worry, we got you. So you talked there as well about being much more deliberate about the vision and where you go and what sort of phase you're at now. And beforehand, it was sort of building the plane as you're flying it to an extent within that. So what have you got to look forward to? What's exciting, and what's the next sort of? I mean, you've spoken about this sort of omnipresent nature of the thing where everyone's using it. And you talked about globalization. What's next for you? What do the next 2-3 years look like for the business?
Bizarrely, in some ways, less innovation. So more focus on the end user and how to make their life more seamless. Right? So a lot of our focus has been on capability and can the platform do very, very difficult problems. Now it becomes to, when it's doing that very difficult problem, make it look like it was easy. Right? Click this button, everything just works. And that's along a number of channels. So it's quite a focus on end user experience, which for us hasn't really been a top priority until now. There's quite a focus on workflow. So how do I take the bits around the edges and all the integrations so that we automatically connect you to the places you're supposed to be connected to. We run the business process, whether it's on our platform or on another platform, we can orchestrate that very easily. And then obviously the old AI word, right? There's a lot of focus for us on how do you actually make AI usable in financial services.
I know you've been talking about that as well.
Yeah.
We believe we have the product that does that.
Yeah.
We're launching it sort of middle of this year. Okay. But it's one where the AI is more of an agentic workflow where each of the agents don't train on your data but know how to write SQL and know how to perform tasks on your behalf. So you end up with a natural language interface that gets you the outcomes as though it were a big LLM, but it hasn't trained on your data. It has your context. It's completely reproducible. You could tell the auditor why it made decisions. And we think that that's the next evolution.
I'm interested from your side on this.
Yeah, it's very interesting there. So what did you do to approach it? Did you hire a team?
When you've got the right team, this stuff just happens. And literally one of the folks in our team came to us and said, we should be looking at it. Here's how we should be looking at it. Here's a white paper for how we should do it. And we went, yeah, do that. Like, literally.
Yeah.
Like, so, and we've always tried to foster that culture of some of our best innovations come from us. Some of it comes from the client. But every now and again, somebody in this room is literally going to go, actually, you should look at the world like this, and we're going to go, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That board's seen some action up there then.
Yeah, literally. So literally, this is one of our people who is ex-CERN, used to work on the Large Hadron Collider, and came and said, actually, if you look at AI and ML, most of it is nonsense. You should look at the world like this. And I read it and went, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, I'm down with that. Yeah. So that was how, right?
Oh, very
like, he literally came to us and said, most of the stuff out there is gubbins. Like the big, powerful models obviously have an awful lot of power, the big LLMs, but the rest of it, most of it's not very usable, especially not in financial services, so we had to look at the problem differently.
So we could be talking about this for hours and hours, and this is, it's a subject which, this whole journey is something which I could be talking about for days, and I know we've got to wrap things up. So I want to look at it and finish by looking at the last 8 years, looking at this sort of journey and say, look, if you can take some of the key learns that you've had over that sort of period, the things there which you'd say, right, someone who's at that first kitchen table sort of conversation, thinking about going into it, other than don't do it. What if you were to give some of those genuine pearls of wisdom that you've picked up on that, on what, as I said before, is one of the great success stories, I think, of this space over the last 10 years. And I love it. I love what you've done with it. So, but if you can think about what you've picked up from that, you'd say would be really useful to pass on to that Tom of 8 years ago. What would you say?
There's sort of three things. One is there's a well-trodden path out there, and investors look for specific things at specific milestones. At all, if you can in any way learn that path, stick to it, your life will be an awful lot easier, right? Unfortunately, most people driven by a manic vision of what they want to do, ignore that. But please don't. Right? Second one is ask yourself the question, do you really want to do it? Like, what are you willing to give up for it? Because it will, this sort of journey burns people. Like, it requires incredibly hard decisions. It will, like, test everyone around you and test you. Do you really want to do it? Is the payoff worth it? Because most of the time it isn't, right? Like, even when you achieve incredible things for it, it's at a high price. So is it worth it? That's the other question to honestly ask yourself. The problem is you're going to do that from a position where you have no idea what the pain looks like. And it's like running a marathon. Or nobody would ever do it if they knew what the pain looked like, right? So that's kind of a piece of advice, but take it with a pinch of salt. And then the last one is make sure you do bring the people around you on the journey with you, right? You need that support network. It is very hard. And
both at home and around.
At home especially, right? Unless you've got that kind of support, it just doesn't work. Like, it's very hard for those around you, and unless you've got that support, it just won't work. So it's a really odd thing to do a startup. Like, it's a really odd thing. On no rational level does it make any sense. And I wouldn't advise most people to do it, because you watch people, right? Most of them fail. And most of them fail because of the people. And most of them fail because it's not because the idea wasn't good enough. It's because the execution's really hard. The funding of it's really hard. The ability to sell a vision and do it repeatedly is really hard. The ability to then execute on it is really hard. The ability to constantly listen to your customers and change dynamically is really hard, and then the ability to change the team when you need to, and in some ways, as I said, it's probably a drastic term, but burn the people around you, like that's really hard. So do you really want to do it? Like the answer should be yes, absolutely.
And you do it again.
But I'd be, if I was doing it again, I'd do it differently. I'd do it in line with the metrics. That's the one lesson. Do it, there's a reason why that's a very well-trodden path. Proof points that you align to funding are very important. And then the other question is, do you need funding? Is your idea really one that needs venture? Right? Like we've done that, but that again comes with pressure. It comes with you have to do it in certain time frames, and if you don't,
with the right people as well.
With the right people, and then if you don't, you're on a timer, you're on a clock. Like, is that really where you want it to be?
I want to be greedy here and ask one last question. I know I'll let you finish up after it, but you mentioned there that there's a throwaway line you said there is most fail because of the people. And I think you guys have been excellent at the people side of that thing all the way through, through the journey. So, what does the people look like to get that bit right? Because if you say, if that's the thing. Look, I've been
resilience. Honestly, and I say it's and the balance of it. So some of your best ideas are going to come from some people who aren't resilient, but shouldn't be in that position. And then the people who do sit at the front door and sit on the front line and take the punches, they've got to be resilient. And those people have to be universally through the whole lot, ideally low ego. And that's where you struggle. Right? That's when you have people who aren't low ego or who aren't able to learn, that's when you really struggle. Like the brightest people doing the bit where they're innovating don't really have an ego. They love the complexity of the problem, and they love the finding a good solution to it. And the best people at the front door don't have an ego and are able to work in a way where when they do suffer a setback, they come back and go, right, this is what we're going to do about it. And that's really the secret to it. If you can find those people who are high EQ, highly resilient and low ego, you're onto a winner.
And you've allowed, by having those people, you've allowed them to attract other people around it, and people want to come in there. You're solving a complex problem with a good story behind it, with good people that then become a magnet to other good people around it. Anvar, I promise to let you have the last word.
I think it's been truly inspiring to hear you talk about this, and it's really good to hear sort of the squiggles, the terrifying decisions, and how tough it really is. But it's a truly inspiring story. So thank you so much for taking the time. It's great talking to you.
Tom, thanks very much.
Brilliant.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for watching. We'll see you on the next episode. Thanks a lot.